tab 6. I'm going to turn it over to our town administrator, Sweet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just wanted to have a discussion. We now have the debt schedule that we've been provided by Tri-County Vocational Technical School. As the board is aware and our residents aware, the project for the replacement building project of the Tri-County Vocational School passed. The town of Rentham passed the project by about 80%. So pretty overwhelmingly, especially for a school building project. We're now left to figure out how to fund it and how to pay for it. We've been having this conversation now for some time, so we know that the potential of the project passing and what that would mean. And one thing I'll say before I pull it up and I'll share with you the debt schedule is it looks like we're probably about a year ahead of schedule for timing of what we were anticipating. And let me just screen share real quick. I emailed this to the board. This just came in. So you did get it late. You should have it in your email as well, but I will share it for those looking on. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay. So the big takeaway is essentially this here, FY24, which is our current fiscal year we're in now. The temporary debt issue, they moved forward with a bond anticipation note of $20 million. With any ban, as we have for our own local projects and the like, the interest payment on the short-term interest is what's owed until they kind of go out and do final borrowing. So the total short-term interest in this line here for FY 2025 is $721,140. Of which Rentham's share in this column here, you can see is 8.17% of the total net debt service, which means in FY 2025, we'll have a interest payment due of $58,947. FY 25 is not the fiscal year that I'm concerned about. Obviously, you know, any increase to the general fund budget, we have to really kind of look and prioritize. It impacts everything else. But again, we have to fund it, and it's a project that is moving forward. We can cover, and we'll talk about a little bit of as we get further into the budget and future conversations, the $58,947 will be included in our FY25 assessment. The FY25 assessment with that $58,947, our share of the interest that will be due in FY25. Inclusive of that and the increase, I think, of about 4 pupils, which is the commitment as of October 1st of 2023, which determines what our assessment will be. It goes up about 10% overall. So the Tri-County Vocational School building project, inclusive of the actual assessment for a student pupil to the town, is about a 10% increase. That's fairly consistent with what we've seen the last couple of years, with where we're being getting hit with that increase as well. The bigger conversation and the conversation that we need to have, and we've started preliminary around, is the debt exclusion conversation, and that is really important for FY 2026. You can see here that the town's portion will jumps up to $682,000 in FY 26 and FY 27, and then just around just under $900,000 for the duration. The majority of this 30-year borrowing is a amount that is not something that the town can afford to cover certainly within our general fund, certainly within our existing levy capacity. As you know, and I've been working hard for the last 6 years, this is now my 7th budget. I've been working on stressing, and we've done that as much as we can, the reduction of our free cash or our one-time revenues to balance our budget. We're still a long way off from that. So that means every fiscal year, we're starting the town budget with a structural deficit of up to $1.5 million, depending on where we've been. And that's been as high as $1.7 million. Not sound municipal financing. There's some other variables that do play into that. The town does do some conservative revenue estimates and things like that, which is sound fiscal budgeting, municipal budgeting. But Right from the get-go, we start out every single fiscal year with a structural deficit because of that issue. To then try to bring in a six, seven, 800 and as much as $900,000 debt payment in the general fund is not doable. It's not doable without significant cuts. The education budget alone occupies about 52% of the entire town's budget, which means there's going to have to be cuts to education. The only real control we have, as you know, is the elementary schools budget. We have very limited pushback. We're one of three communities, yes, the largest, but only one of three voices ultimately with King Philip budget. We don't have a lot of discretion there, a lot of, if it passes, what we have to fund. From my end, continues to have those pushbacks as much as possible and holding them to certain percentage increases, but ultimately we're kind of left with not a lot of control there. And then when it comes to Tri-County, we have zero control over. We have zero control over the assessment that's related to that. And as well as I do, as a new building gets built and occupied, that also draws more students. So we're potentially taking those students and potentially adding that to a potential increase, not only of the building project or the capital piece of it, but certainly the interest in attending and all things. Now, not to say that the buildings are, that's a moot point at this point. It's been approved. They definitely need the project. They need a building. The community, as we said, 80% passed. I think at least with the turnout, 80% of those supported it. We just now need to pay for that vote. And what we're going to be asking for is a debt exclusion vote to be able to handle that portion. Out of the 11 communities that make up Tri-County, the only one that has done it so far is the town of Franklin. Franklin passed it with their November election. They're also in a unique position, unlike the other 10 communities in when they're, I think North Attleboro may be on the same cycle, but as a town council form of government, as a legislative body, they don't have a town meeting, whether it be open or representative. They have a council manager form of government, and they have a November local election. So they did pass it. They're the only one of the 11. They did pass a debt exclusion in that community. What I'd like to, and Mike King, our finance director, is on as well. He can also answer any questions. But I think as we've known this is coming, I think we're going to be looking to ask for a fairly quick turnaround with our local election as a ballot question for April. I've discussed it with the town clerk and her concerns around whether or not it's even possible to do with the state primary, which would be in September. She is not fully on board with that, whether it's even doable. So moving into kind of next year, we have our local election, obviously, for April. But then we're left in September 3rd, I think, with the state primary, followed by the November election and the like. So we'd like to get it on for this local election as a ballot question, which would mean the board would have to approve the ballot question at our next meeting on February 20th. Pretty standard language that's already been kind of drafted up. We would have legal review and look to put it on. Concerns around that is the lack of education in the sense of timing. It's a fairly quick turnaround to educate our voters on what we're asking for and why we're on there. A 45-day kind of education campaign, I think is not ideal. But again, this debt issuance it happened quicker than we were told initially. We were kind of thinking this was going to be a 2027 as opposed to a 2026, which has ramped up the importance of the necessity to kind of do this sort of now. If it were, unfortunately, if it failed, having additional abilities to add it again down the road, because again, not passing it as a debt exclusion would have significant impacts to the town operations across the board. One thing, just before I answer any questions, and happy to do so, and as I said, Mike's with us as well. Just as a caveat, FY26, our last payment of our debt exclusion for King Philip is due. So that's about $600,000. So you can see, and what in this breakdown, you can see what the impact for a tax rate for both commercial and the median annualized increase for both commercial and residential. In 26, we kind of will have that one overlap year because we will have a debt payment due for the for King Philip as our debt exclusion. We only have one debt exclusion. The only excluded debt we have is the King Philip regional school debt. And that does roll off in FY26. Obviously, there's other conversations, right? I mean, we know we're in the process of talking about our own elementary school. We're in the process of talking about the public works facility, and a number of other things. I'm sure King Philip also will be back at the table with projects, but as it stands today, our debt exclusion that exists rolls off in FY26, but we do need to take on this new debt. So that is roughly around a $400,000 delta without anything else coming on. Not that that's minimal. Obviously there's going to be increases, but it's not as much as the 900,000 if once the KP rolls off as far as impact. So happy to answer any questions. I know this is happening a little bit quicker than we had anticipated, and as Mike and I have been involved with the conversations for as long as we have, they were really pushing that FY27 was going to be really our first kind of payment, but it looks like that's not the case. This debt schedule, I think, is carrying about a 4.25% interest rate, about 4.25. There is that caveat that interest rates are based on the current market conditions and obviously are subject to change. And then, as I said, this is based on our enrollment based as of October 1st of 2023. And future debt assessments will be will vary based on actual student enrollment. That's how as part of this district it's actually determined. So that's where it is now. Generally speaking, we're kind of we'll be in that range. Ideally, they are able to secure a lower interest rate, but again, also the interest in enrollment will also trigger our impact for the capital piece as well. So that's all from the presentation, Mr. Chair, and Mike and I are happy to answer any questions.
All right, I'd like to welcome Mike King, our Finance Director, to the meeting. Mike has been with us, what now, 3 years? And
yes, Mr. Chairman, 3 years.
He's been a great addition. We welcome you to our meeting, and I'm going to open the questions to our board members. Since on my screen, Select Board Member Rouse is right next to Kevin, I'm going to start with her.
Kevin, will you just go through again? So King Philip rolls off in 2026. Is that what you said? I'm sorry.
That's correct. Yeah. So fiscal year 2026. So 2 more fiscal years. We have FY25 payment, and then our last payment will be in FY26. So we have 2 remaining debt payments for KP.
Okay, thank you.
And that's our only excluded debt in the town of Rentham.
At this time, yes. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So just for the folks at home, when that debt exclusion comes off, it does not free up any monies to help fund anything within our operating budget because it was a debt exclusion, was outside that. Where some of the debt we had for the elementary school, the library, and town hall, that was taking from services those debts rolled off, we were able to restore services, correct?
That's absolutely 100% accurate. Yeah, the excluded debt excludes us from the levy and Prop 2. So this debt being outside of that, essentially it helps residents and our taxpayers, commercial as well. But it doesn't help back in anything with regards to the operation budget or the the general fund, as you stated.
Select Board Member Gallo.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Kevin, do we have a document at some point, at some place where the residents could look and see debt that's falling off in 26, the estimated debt that we know of as of right now that's coming on over the next, let's just say 5 fiscal years, and the impact to just get an idea of what we're looking at, from potential debt exclusion needs with regard to, I don't know, for infrastructure, for potential wells, for a potential DPW facility, because when I'm talking to residents, I'm often asked that this very question is, what long-term debt do we have rolling off? What do we forecast coming on in the next 5 years? And then the overall impact of that.
Yeah, it's real easy to do based on committed debt. And we do have that. And what I showed obviously is the proposed, subject to change debt schedule for this particular debt. And then
Right.
what's falling off, we can certainly show, the existing two payments that remain as far as excluded debt. The difficulty becomes we do it internally and kind of I hesitate to put numbers out there on projects. It's way too early for me to try to for us, we haven't even gone into any real conversation as far as a school building committee. As
Right.
far as costs associated with that it's a whole other different formula because of the MSBA reimbursement, 52%. And we can do basically take by chunks of 10 millions using a 4.25% conservative interest rate and come up with what is the average single family home impact and some of that. But I hesitate to kind of put that out as, sharing any, because it's all hypothetical in some ways. I mean, right. I mean, we're talking about a $10 million DPW facility or a 30 million, $80 million school.
If I could interject, I agree with you 100%. Maybe I'm talking about more project based, right? So people want to know, like, what big expenses do we have coming up in town, I guess. And I completely agree with you that are we talking, to your points, it's very hard to put those numbers together when we don't even have a school committee, when we don't even have rough numbers from our own school committee, on our school. We don't even have rough numbers yet on the proposed DPW facility. But when I talk to residents, I just think it's important for them to know that, we have Tri-County, we have the Rentham School, we potentially are going to be asking for, DPW facility. We have infrastructure needs. We're testing wells in West, you know what I'm saying? Like, I just want to make sure people understand that what is going on and what the potential needs are over the next 5 years.
Sure. Yeah.
Something to consider.
Large scale capital infrastructure replacements. I mean, we can put kind of raw numbers on, okay, we have a backlog of, say, road infrastructure, road and sidewalks, 15 million.
Right.
Those type of things we could do. Obviously, any of the water projects is the ratepayers. That's a
Right.
debt, principal and interest debt within the water rates, and is a little bit treated differently as far as the taxes. But yeah, I mean, I think some of that is still kind of being fished out, but we could certainly at least we know project wise what do we have kind of on the horizon for the next 10 years as far as big project infrastructure. And then of course every year we have a 5-year capital plan. Mike's taken over that. Mike's got a great foundation on that. We'll be continuing to expand upon the work that I did initially, drafting the first comprehensive plan back in 2019, which then became Chad Lovett, our former director of facilities and capital planning, and now Mike has taken over the leadership of that, and has already distributed, met with department heads, are having the conversation. Everything's due actually at the end of this month, and some of those ongoing things, most of which we've been able to handle outside of borrowing. That's where that whole component of utilizing all of the town's free cash and
Right.
things, one-time revenues, becomes concerning, right? We want to try to have, when we deal with capital and we deal with this infrastructure stuff, is have a balanced approach of not all be debt, not all be from the budget and that sort of thing. So those one-off things that are deemed capital, which is 25,000 or more, that has a useful life of 5 years or 5 or more years, kind of funding those things. So yeah, I mean, we can try to at least put big picture around, because obviously we know we're having these conversations. We just don't know, even as much as cost wise, it's just so year to year is difficult, because we've seen project delays each year. You delay in some of these projects have gone up $1 million. That's why, like, to that point, like to your point on, if we say 10 million and then 2 years from now it's a 60. Yeah,
I just don't like when I want residents to have as much information as possible, and I don't ever want to have anyone say to me, like, what do you mean you're going to be coming to me for potentially a new DPW facility? Well, it's been on the plan for 20 years. We've been talking about it now for this many years. I just think education is key. So whatever we could do to get our long-term needs, to make sure that as many people have access to that as possible, I just think it's going to help us with the residents when we're making these difficult decisions.
Understood.
Thank you.
Right. Select Board Member Harrington.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Kevin, the only thing I have is really right now would be just the timing of trying to not educate the public on the debt exclusion by trying to rush it through too quickly. As a board member, quite honestly, I think we rush too many things through, and it's in the end, I just don't think it's open and transparent to the townspeople.
Fair enough. That's kind of what Mike and I, have been battling with. I mean, we have our local election, as you know, first Monday in April, and timing isn't ideal. But then short of that, we're up against, I guess, we're trying to time this because we need to have an approval for FY26 operations. So if the state primary is not it, if the the election in November isn't it, there's a special election perhaps outside of that. We're now asking the town clerk and them to do another election in a year that's already several elections. And I try to get it on there for April, try to do what we can to educate and get the word out, recognizing, and that's the piece that Mike and I have been battling with. It's not ideal. We fully agree. But we also are concerned that, this is coming due, and, FY26 will be here before we know it, as far as the ability, because we're not really, we're not talking about July 1 of 25. We're talking about, the budget impacts and everything else that's happening a year from now. Because if this 682,000 is going to be due no matter what, and it's up to the towns now obligated to fund it. So we got to come up with 700,000 if a debt exclusion didn't pass, and that means significant budget cuts. That is a bigger conversation that we can't wait to have until the spring of that year. So that I fully agree with you. It's not ideal timing, education. But
I totally, like you said, I totally agree, and it's something the town voted for, so we're all on board with. Obviously, the townspeople are on board with paying for it, but I still think trying to rush it through, it just isn't transparent to me anyway. But that's it. That's all I got.
Yeah, in a perfect world, right? It would have been the same ballot question. As we've talked about, we would never do a project where we're asking,
Correct.
do you want to build it? And then months later saying, well, now you said, yeah, you want to build it, but now we're asking you to pay for it. That would have been one vote, the amount, and it either passes up or down with the debt exclusion. Unfortunately, the way this is structured, we didn't have that ability with its separate district and all of the 11 communities. So this isn't an ideal way of going about any of this. And certainly would never happen if this was a local project.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. King, would you like to add anything?
Town Administrator Suite hit on all the major talking points. Thank you.
All right. So you're going to get back to us. So we may have something in front of us on the 20th, pending what the town clerk finds out, correct?
That's correct. So I've spoke to her a couple times today, and the request is to do it for April 1. We just need to have legal review of the language and ask the board to approve the ballot question at your next meeting, which would be the 20th, if the April 1 is to happen.
Okay. Could you do us one more favor? I know you're in the budget season, but if that does come to us on the 20th for an April 1 vote, could you prepare an action plan on how we can get the message out to our residents and how to educate? So we're just not putting it out there. Let's have a plan if we have to go that route on how we could do this. And anybody on the meeting, if you were an advocate to help, I know there was a lot of people who came out to support the Tri-County vote. if you could just reach out to Amanda at Town Hall to show your support and help us spread the word, it would be great. Anything we can do in the event that we need to go that route, we should be prepared.
Absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, Mike and I discussed that today about, the need to do a public, PR campaign and just educate, the residents of why we're asking for what we are and why we're, why it's on the ballot. So.
And I agree with Select Board Member Harrington. We hate rushing things.
Yeah.
But it's unfortunately what ends up happening is when we're 11th of the pie and everyone else pushes through, we have to kind of go with it, and it kind of stinks. But thank you for everything. Thank you for Michael King for joining us this evening. We appreciate it, and we appreciate everything you do. We're going to go over to tab 7. This is to vote to reappoint town manager with a term effective February 14, 2020.